Hi, my name is Bill Edney, and I'm one of the co-authors of Tibet. I'm here today to talk to you about the Sherpa. The Sherpa is Tibet's integrated development environment. It's built completely in Tibet and therefore runs directly in the web browser. As you can see here, we have the initial content from a Tibet application that's produced by the Tibet clone command that we ran at the terminal. And looking at the URL bar, we have launched the application in a developer mode. Also, look at the lower right-hand corner. When we launch an app in developer mode, you'll see the Tibet icon in this corner. Click it to activate the Sherpa. When we activate the Sherpa animates in and wraps our application in a set of panels, almost like a heads-up display. We're going to use these panels to develop our application. Let's take a quick tour around some of these panels. In the upper left-hand corner, we have the About panel. It lets you know which version of Tibet is currently installed, which version of your app you are currently developing, and it has some links to technical pursuit support pages. On the right and the left, we have bays that are used by different tools that will be plugged into them as we develop our app. We'll see more of them later when we discuss the Halo tool. In the lower left-hand corner, we have the Screens panel. It shows us which files are currently loaded as part of our app. In the lower right-hand corner, we have the Changes panel. As we make changes to our application, they'll show up here. All changes in Tibet happen dynamically. There are no compilers or translator required. The Changes panel allows us to control importing changes that have happened on the server, as well as pushing changes that we've made in the client back to the server. We'll see how that works later as well. At the bottom, let's check out Tibet Developer Console. It is both a JavaScript evaluator and a console onto the Tibet shell, an object-oriented shell that you can use to manipulate data and author actions. We can cycle through output modes so that we can either show more or less terminal content, depending on how we're working at the moment. Finally, at the top, we have the Sherpa Inspector. The inspector gives us the power to browse through a whole set of data sources, including Tibet itself. Here we have one that manages CouchDB resources, and another that manages AWS. We'll see how they work later on. Building the visual part of an application for the web can be a daunting task. Let's see how the Sherpa makes this easier. Our first step is to delete the content that comes with every new Tibet application. This is automatically produced when you use Tibet clone to start development of a new app. We need to clear this content. To do that, use Shift right-click. Again, Shift right-click on the content. You'll see this small box with 8 gold dots or handles around it. We call this the halo. Notice how the left-hand side panel changes. At the top, you see an abbreviated display of the DOM structure. Towards the bottom, you see some styling information about the content. If you pass your mouse over the items in the DOM structure, you'll see that item highlight along with its corresponding DOM element. Now make sure that the Hello World app element is selected. We call this element the application element. It acts as the root of your application and cannot be deleted. Let's right-click inside of the halo. You'll see this menu pop up. There's a lot of items here. Scroll through them. The one we want is empty content. We're going to empty out the application element and add some of our own content. Quickly, notice how the Changes panel readout shows the number 1 here. That's because we've made a change to one of our app's assets. And if we want to preserve that change, we're going to have to push that change to the server. Pop open this panel, and you'll notice that the URL that is changed is the application element's template URL. The application element is a templated tag. and has a template file associated with it. We altered the content of that tag, so the Sherpa is telling us we have to push this to the server to save that change. Now let's add some new content. To do that, we drag off of the inspector toolbar here. We drop it inside of the app element, and we see this panel. There's a long list of possible tags here that we can insert. Some of them are native to the browser, and some are not. Let's choose an HTML label. Note that Tibet is an XHTML environment, so if we would have typed in the tag here, we would have needed to have typed HTML:label. So the label is now inserted and it's selected, but because it has 0 height, because it has no content, the halo is collapsed to a dot. Now let's add some text to our label. Right-click on the HTML label element and select Assist. This will show us the element assistant. It allows us to add, change, or remove attributes. It also allows us to change the text content. Let's add some text content to our label. Next, let's add an input to the application element. As we add more markup, sometimes the visual clutter can make it difficult to see particular drop targets. So while dragging, hold down the Control key, and the view will rotate around, showing us the document structure. We can now drop the input directly into our app tag. So now we have our label and field. And for ease of use, we want to group these elements so that we can manipulate them as one. To do this, we halo on the common parent of both, in this case, the application element. And holding down the Option key, we drag across both of them. When we release the mouse, the Sherpa asks us how we would like to group these. Let's select HTML span. It's great that we have a label and field group, but let's say we want more than one. Rather than building each one up from pieces of markup, which can be tedious, let's use the lower right halo handle, and this time we'll use the multiplier tool. To do this, grab the lower right handle, and holding down the Option key, drag out, and see how the item multiplies. We now want to resize the grid grouping element itself. If we hover over the lower right gold handle again, we can grab it and resize the grid to a particular size. Notice here how the Sherpa shows us a pop-up that tells us that since the grid was created as an inline grid, it needs its CSS display value to be changed in order to resize it. So let's do that and try again. Let's reposition this element as well. To do that, grab the upper left handle and start to drag. When we do that, we get another pop-up that reminds us that this grid isn't really a CSS positioned element and asks us to set a value for how we would like it to be positioned. Let's specify absolute and try again. Okay, so now we have a set of text fields. Let's change the text of their label. We can do that by shift double-clicking on the label itself and typing. We can move between them by using Tab and Shift-Tab. A key part of building apps is binding them to data. Tibet uses a markup-based data binding mechanism that is very powerful. The Sherpa uses that to provide a visual way to do data binding. Let's see how that works. First, we're going to need to navigate to the data source that we're going to be binding to in the Sherpa inspector. This is a list of all the URI sources that Tibet knows about. As you can see, there's quite a few. But this list allows us to filter by typing. In this case, we're going to bind to the TIBET.json file that comes with every Tibet project and contains configuration data. Here we can see and edit the JSON the TIBET.json file contains. If we click this button to show the schema of the JSON, Tibet will automatically derive a JSON schema from the raw JSON using a straightforward set of heuristics. Notice how these property names are live as we mouse over them. What we really want to do is connect these to our GUI fields below. We can do that by holding down the Shift and Option keys and dragging a connection between the property name and the GUI field. We're going to turn off service tag insertion right now. We'll talk about service tags in a later video. Now we're going to build up a binding expression. We're going to do a two-directional binding here, bind input-output, and we're going to bind the value of that text field to the name property from that piece of JSON. And you can see the markup that gets generated here. We have now established a live binding between the GUI field and the JSON. If we alter this, we can see that the JSON updates. Notice how Tibet's automatically tracking this. It knows that the JSON has changed inside of the client, and it knows that we're going to have to push that file back to the server. There are quicker ways to build a form, however. Tibet can use a combination of its JSON schema capability and a form generator to build forms on the fly for further editing. Let's first clear the content of the app tag again. To build a form, we simply go to our JSON schema and drag from a property that represents a key value collection down onto the canvas and let go. This small dialog box appears with JSON schema that has been automatically derived from the raw JSON. We can edit that if we like, but here we'll just click Insert. Tibet automatically builds a form directly from the JSON schema. Notice again that this form is live. Tibet has integration with the CouchDB NoSQL database, an excellent database for the web with its built-in HTTP support combined with a REST interface. The Sherpa provides an inspector plugin to browse the CouchDB database directly from the web browser. As you can see here, we're browsing data directly out of CouchDB, right in the Sherpa. We're going to navigate to a CouchDB database view inside of our test database and grab that part of the path and drag it down into our canvas. Tibet shows a dialog box allowing us to set some configuration, but we'll ignore that for now and just click Insert. A quick master detail view is built directly from the data. And as we can see, it's fully functional. The promise of Tibet is that the future is written in markup. One way that Tibet provides this capability is with a complete custom element system. We have been using custom elements this whole time. And now, let's see how easy it is to create your own custom element. To do this, we're going to return to our simple grouped label and field pair and select Make Custom Tag. The Sherpa shows us the Tibet Type Assistant dialog box because every Tibet custom tag is represented by a Tibet type. We name the new tag and click OK. The markup that we haloed on is then saved as the custom tags markup. and that markup is replaced by the custom tag in our Canvas page. We can verify this by looking at the app elements template. One thing to notice here is that Tibet has full editing capability built right into its inspector. You can edit XML, XHTML, CSS, and JSON directly in the browser, accept those changes into the system to see their immediate effect, and then push those changes to the server. For larger editing tasks, you can ask the Sherpa to open an external editor on the file associated with the content that you're currently haloed on. Tibet keeps track of the files associated with your JavaScript, XHTML, and CSS constructs. In this case, since I have my external editor configured to be Visual Studio Code, when I click Open Structure, Tibet will automatically open the file associated with the field pair custom tag directly in Visual Studio Code. We can edit this and then propagate that change right back into Tibet without reloading. One of the most popular widget building libraries to emerge in JavaScript in the last few years has been the React library. Tibet provides great integration with React. Let's see how that works. Let's drag a piece of tofu right off the inspector toolbar, as before. And you can see that we have a number of tag types demonstrating the integration between Tibet and React. Let's choose one and insert it. So what we're looking at here, even though it looks like a regular text field, is actually a React component that contains an HTML text field. Let's do some common things that we might do with other Tibet components. One thing that we might do is bind it to data. As before, we navigate to our JSON schema, and we drag a connection right down to the React text field. Add the same binding expression. And you can see that the React field is bound to the data, just like with a regular text field. Again, if we change it, the data changes. Tibet has one final message for us today, and that is, I'm coming out. Hello, world. Let's show two last capabilities of the Sherpa. First of all, we need to make sure and push the application tags changes, which currently contain an H1 saying hello world. That's now been pushed to the server. Let's now build an application package. To do that, let's click on the wrench. As you can see here, the Tibet server is now building an entire application package right from our sources and produces a link. When we click on that link, Tibet will load its application package and show us the app running in another tab. Tibet also has the capability to build application packages and deploy them to remote servers. Here's a list of the environments currently supported by Tibet. This uses Tibet's built-in Docker capability to build Docker packages and deploy them out to PaaS environments. We're not going to show that today. We'll leave that for another video. That's a brief description of the capabilities of the Sherpa. We've shown how the Sherpa makes authoring Tibet applications easier. Thanks for your time. And remember, the future's written in markup.